right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate you all joining this session today. My name is Alex Hemmati. I run the Federal North America team. I am stationed out of Washington, D.C. I also have Elaine, who's my colleague sitting actually here covering Canada. And if any of you are interested after our session, our booth is right outside, and she'll be happy to answer any of your questions. The topic that we've picked today to talk about is around cyber range. I know the definition of cyber range varies from term to term. One of the things that I've learned in the past 14 months from being at this company is that every time I ask a DoD person or a civilian person or a private person what is a range, they describe it differently. So we're here to sort of dig in a little bit more and provide you an overview of our definition of what range is. That's a known fact. I was going to play around and say, you know what, I got some news for you guys that nobody understands, but you know, eventually your organizations are going to get hacked. The trend has certainly changed in the past 10 years, where 10 years ago I met with a CISO of Northeast City, a very prominent Northeast City, and I asked him, hey, you know, let's assume that you get popped. What happens then? The guy looked at me and he said, listen, if there's stuff crawling on my network that I don't know about, I don't want to know about it. That was the trend 10 years ago. Until, guess who got hacked? Target gets hacked. And all of a sudden, the Target CISO was literally the first C-level executive from a security standpoint that was fired. And then everybody started taking security a little more seriously and being vocal about, hey, you know what? Maybe we should start looking at how to protect ourselves. There are three things that I would say is a key takeaway as part of this conversation. It's people, processes, and technologies. And we will walk you guys through all of that. As I mentioned, security teams will go through this process. Now, you may have measures in place where you'll invite a company that I worked for in the past, like Mandiant or FireEye, to come in and clean up for you or do an assessment for you, or you have your own security teams that will be able to sort of take care of this scenario for you. Some of the compromises that are more notable that happened in the past couple of years, interestingly enough, one of my backgrounds is with a company called HB Gary. Anybody heard of that company name? Nobody, huh? There we go. HB Gary was the first company back in 2011 that got popped by Anonymous. That was my first day. So go figure that out. My email didn't work the first day. I thought I was fired already. So the question becomes, you know, are you ready? You know, is your organization prepared when an attack does take place? Are your people prepared? Is the technology in place? And are the processes in place where all the way from your CISO, he at the leadership position, he understands exactly what needs to go down, gets triggered down, so he can get those reports, put it together, and go back to the stakeholders and provide an overview of the compromise. I was asking folks if anybody remembers who this guy is, but this guy looks like Sherman from American Pie. But thank you, Elaine, for putting that in there. That's very entertaining. So, you know, when it comes to, when we start talking about some of the challenges that take place as far as training is concerned, I've been doing endpoint for about 10 years. And when I started looking at cyber range, one of the interesting things that I noticed is that in traditional training, there's a lack of exercise. You know what, we all learn by doing. I don't learn by reading. I'll read something, I'll walk away, I'll forget about it if I'm not practicing it or if I'm not going through it. The goal is essentially by going through real life exercises and getting an understanding of how to respond to different types of incidents, whether it's blue team, whether it's red team, whether it's capture the flag, whether you're military or private. It really doesn't matter. Can anybody tell me what that is? There you go. Why did I put it up there? Out, loud, loud. So I put that on there for a reason. The Air Force, the United States Air Force, and I apologize since I'm from the States, that's who I can talk to. If you have more questions, Elaine will be happy to talk about the Canadian Air Force. The United States Air Force has a very robust simulation program, and they put their airmen through these type of programs because they want them to experience real scenarios in a real cockpit, getting the same effect that they'll be getting otherwise in a combat, as an example. So the concept of how we have our airmen go through these flight simulations, we've taken that concept and we've applied it to our cyber range platform. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. I'm trying not to get into the product conversations as much, but I will sort of provide you an overview of the platform, how it's settled from an architectural standpoint. And if you guys have any other questions, like I said, Elaine is outside and she'd be happy to answer any of those questions. At the end of the day, this is a sport analogy that we all can relate to. You practice by doing. You learn as you're doing, not by reading and putting a book on the shelves. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Some of the industries, notable websites, media have started talking about, how software is just not enough. Every organization thinks that by buying more software, by buying more security products, putting layers over layers over layers, that they'd be able to easily protect themselves, protect their environments. At the end of the day, the bad guy that's attacking you, it's not costing him anything to sit there and come up with a new code, whereas you're spending millions of dollars on new technologies. Closing the gap on the education. More organizations that we're talking to are beginning to realize that, hey, you know what? Some of the challenges that I have training budgets that I got to spend on. So I'm spending them on, getting my guys trained, getting certificates, getting understanding, how to run a SOC, how to respond to a SOC. But at the end of the day, a lot of the folks that are going through these trainings, they're not coming out as being a practitioner. That's the goal here, right? Is basically making sure that your team after these exercises understand these processes. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Some of the other notes that was mentioned, I want to get to how we perceive cyber range to be. How we perceive cyber range is really interesting. The way that we actually designed this was based on military's request to create a hyper-realistic environment where they can train their cyber warriors and basically get individuals that not necessarily have any type of a cyber training, and in a matter of months and based on a certain curriculum, get them up and running based on those exercises and scenarios. So how we're applying to this training is through a real-world network. And what we say by that is that we've designed a mimic of a real environment, virtualized, with real components. Now, we're not a product-centric platform, we're process-centric, meaning that regardless of the product that you're using, you gotta be able to understand how to detect, respond, and prevent. And as part of that exercise, what we've done is that we've integrated with a lot of technologies that you see here today, and we're applying those technologies as part of our range exercise. So as an example, with SIM, we have an integration with ArcSight, we have an integration with Splunk, with QRadar, the checkpoint from a firewall perspective, or Palo Alto, because we want to make sure that individuals that are going through these type of trainings, they understand how to use these products in order to respond effectively. The cyber range platform, so that's basically what our platform looks like. It's a virtualized network. We have traffic generators that are essentially creating the traffic coming into that environment. We have an attack generator. Now, the attack generator is really interesting because we are deploying actual malwares into that environment. We are not mimicking a behavior of a malware or an iteration of a malware. This is an actual malware that gets deployed into that virtual environment. I know one of the questions that may be brought up later on is, okay, well, what if the malware gets out? This entire platform is actually air-gapped and not connected to the internet. You guys can decide to have remote access to it. You guys can sit in the same room and do cyber exercises. Some of the training and the scenarios that we have about 30 scenarios, give and take, that are available in this range, all the way from an entry-level SOC training to ICS training, to an advanced SOC training, to even to doing some red team exercises, and the industrial control systems as mentioned. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in more details. The product also allows you to do advanced customizations. I see a couple of faces that dropped by the booth and they were asking about customization. So the product actually allows you to be able to create your own networks and create your own scenarios. And what's interesting about this is that we have 30 scenarios that are out of the box, but if you have your own iteration of a malware or if you want to create your own scenario, we actually give you the tool to be able to do that and upload it into the platform. Now, with regards to the network, same goes about that. We have a number of networks that are already pre-built into the environment that you can leverage within the range, or you can go ahead and create a network completely from scratch. We do have some customers that have actually taken their production network and have mimicked it in a smaller scale into the range, because they're looking to not only use it for cyber exercises, but they're also using it for pen testing, they're using it for POCs, they're using it for employee skill validation. There are so many other variances of how this type of technology can get applied into an environment, not necessarily just conducting traditional cyber training. As you can see on the pictures, the Israeli Defense Forces are actually the ones that originally this product was designed for, and they have multiple cyber range facilities in Israel that they're going through, and they actually are inviting a lot of other foreign militaries to come and go through these type of exercises. We talk about soft skills. One of the things that happens, I don't know if, obviously I'm not gonna ask these questions because I don't expect you guys to raise your hand, but I'm guessing most of you guys have gone through some type of an incident in the past, so you feel that pressure. You go through that feeling of, just being so vulnerable, not knowing exactly what we need to do next. Unfortunately or fortunately, I've had the pleasure or mispleasure of being part of those organizations that were invited to come in and do the incident response when those organizations were popped. And one of the first things that I learned in those processes is, you know what? Doesn't matter what technology you have, doesn't matter what process, and doesn't matter what type of skill sets or people you have. At the end of the day, those soft skills is when it becomes handy. The communications between teams, when you're under pressure, understanding what type of data you need to deliver, what type of responsibility you need to adapt as part of this. And I'll give you guys the good, bad, and ugly. First engagement we did with an organization in US, these guys had the technology. They had obviously a good funding, so they had the technology placed. They had the right people, they had the right skill sets, understanding how to leverage these technologies and how to go about conducting the investigations. And they had processes in place. They were able to contain the malware in less than 48 hours. And it was actually a pretty sophisticated malware that was geared toward that specific agency. Another example of bad is really not understanding the processes, having the skill sets, not having the skill sets, having the technology and having the process, but not having the right people understand how to apply those processes or technologies. What ended up happening, and I kid you guys not, because I was there, the malware that got deployed in that environment was so sophisticated that every time it was changing patterns, you could actually see the analyst names at the end of that signature, the analysts that were sitting in that SOC. That's how bad these guys were owned. But at the same time, there was really not a process in play. Nobody knew exactly how to leverage these type of transitions. And the last piece was around a simple malware that was a drive-by, and it got made into such a big deal that $500,000 worth of hardware got thrown out for no reason. Point being, there's going to be financial damage to private organizations. There's going to be reputation damage to public organizations. So we all need to be prepared for that. Talk about our ROI. It's pretty self-explanatory as to what it's written here. Getting ready mentally, whether you're doing a team exercise or whether you're doing an individual exercise. As a team exercise, the way that we operate each scenario is as if you are actually managing a production environment. Is by taking up responsibilities as part of the SOC and communicating with each other as you're solving this problem. Now, this problem is broken down within each scenario from a detection, response, and prevention, which is based on this framework. And we've also recently aligned it based on a MITRE attack matrix based on some of the customers that we've had. So your folks will understand exactly what each step that needs to take place within the detection phase, within the response phase, and the remediation phase. Multiple use cases, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, organizations are using this for different means. It's just not for a traditional range. They're using it as part of the blue team, red team, CTF, capture the flag exercise. Some organizations are using it actually, and this is actually one of the system integrators in the US that really brought this to my attention, is that they said, hey, we have about 400 guys that we hire every year as part of the security teams, and they say the right things. Absolutely, they say the right things. We hire them, put them on a contract. 3 months later, we get a call from our customer saying that this guy doesn't really know what he's talking about, and he understands the concept, just doesn't know how to run the system. So one of the tools, how they're looking to use this technology is actually as part of the interview process by throwing them in the middle of the exercise and see exactly if they can walk the walk. We do provide certifications as part of the exercise, so that's certainly something that's obviously important to a lot of security folks as they're getting trained and they're putting hours in there. And it allows you to be able to get a little bit granular in more sophisticated environments and simulate your own network and your own tools and be able to exercise your own playbooks. The Australian government, I put some of the press release that was out there because the Australian DND, they actually have deployed this all across the board, and they're using it very religiously, and they've actually incorporated it into the tactics as part of their cybersecurity exercises. And we can basically share this presentation with you guys if you wish to do so. Some of the customers that we're running in the environment worldwide, surprisingly, we have a great adaptation in the United States from universities because they're actually looking at implementing the cyber range into their curriculum and having students that are becoming graduates of the cybersecurity degree program go through a phase of understanding how to respond in different scenarios and really at the end of the day become a practitioner. And I think that's the biggest challenge right now. The industry is missing talent. There's a lot of jobs out there and a lot of people are coming out with a cybersecurity degree, but at the end of the day, there are not that many people that are qualified to do that specific job or command that is needed. And I think from our perspective, having to go through some exercises with Cyberbit Cyber Range platform, it would leverage them to become more qualified for those type of positions. A demo, we were actually planning to do a demo, but I would prefer that we leave it outside and we don't do a demo. I don't want the folks over at the conference yell at me. So with that being said, I thank you so much for your time. I take any questions if you guys, if there's anything that you want to talk about.